Shortly before we came on the air today, an extraordinary test of the rule of law was going down in a federal courtroom here in New York. The judge overseeing the federal criminal prosecution of New York's current sitting mayor, Eric Adams, ordered Justice Department officials who want the charges against Adams to be dismissed to show up in his courtroom and explain themselves and to try to rationalize what former interim U.S. Attorney Danielle Sassoon said, quote, amounted to a quid pro quo. That this was even a necessary step speaks to how completely the Justice Department has ceased to be a criminal justice organ. When the Justice Department's own actions trigger a string of high-level resignations, when former U.S. attorneys like Jeff Berman and David Kelly and Mary Jo White and Jim Comey feel the need to publicly sound the alarm, when 900 former federal prosecutors, including former special counsel Jack Smith, sound the alarm too, you know we are in uncharted territory. And this coalition spans the political spectrum. It includes people with, quote, bulletproof conservative credentials, Federalist Society members, and former clerks for the most conservative Supreme Court justices in history. Listen to what another prominent former U.S. attorney had to say today. Quote, in my 7 years as a U.S. attorney for the District of New Jersey, we brought 130 cases of political corruption. Though I have been a lifelong Republican, corruption has no party. The cases were against Republicans and Democrats alike. The reason those cases were so important was that it showed citizens that betrayal of the public trust would not be tolerated and could not be fixed or explained away. Our ability to govern ourselves, the very basis of our civilized society, could not survive for very long without that belief. That is why the events of the last week regarding the dismissal of the prosecution of New York City Mayor Eric Adams are so disturbing and so dangerous. Weaponization of the law is wrong, not just some of the time, but all of the time. The former U.S. attorney swinging away at Donald Trump's new leaders of DOJ, that would be Chris Christie. When Chris Christie and Jack Smith are in public, loud agreement about how dangerous something Donald Trump is doing, we will pay attention. We do not know what happens next, but we do know that today the task of upholding the rule of law fell not to the Department of Justice. It fell to one judge here in New York. Upholding the rule of law used to be the job, used to be something that all three branches of government at least cared about. But this president and this Congress are not at the table anymore. So now it falls to that one branch, which is under excruciating pressure. And if we come up short there, that's because the system wasn't set up that way. It wasn't supposed to do that. But here we are. And that we are here is extraordinary and unprecedented in and of itself. For that conversation, here at the table, former top official at the Department of Justice, MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissmann's back. Also joining us, MSNBC legal analyst, former SDNY Criminal Division Deputy Chief Christy Greenberg is back. She was in the courthouse today. Plus, New York Times investigative reporter, MSNBC national security contributor Mike Schmidt is here. Christy, I start with you. You were there. What happened?
Well, everything you just said in your lead up about all the alarm bells going off from all these former federal prosecutors, there was not a hint of that in this courthouse today. You went into that courtroom, and according to Emil Bovee, he got up and said, this is just like any other motion to dismiss. There's nothing exotic here other than the fact that there are some people behind me who may disagree. And he continued to say, this is just so ordinary. This is like any other case where somebody is exercising their prosecutorial discretion. And he made it seem like everything was normal. And the problem with that was it so clearly wasn't. He was alone at that table. There was nobody else there with him. And all the other prosecutors, the four prosecutors who had been on that case, they all withdrew from that case. People resigned because of this case. It was the elephant in the room. And the judge never bothered to ask about it. The judge didn't ask the tough questions that I think everybody in that room wanted him to ask. He frankly seemed very scared and intimidated to be there. He's a new judge, and I understand that this is a very unusual situation, but there are questions that really needed to be asked here. For example, when you have Emil Bovee saying, even if there had been a quid pro quo, I don't think that would have been a problem with my motion to dismiss. How do you not follow up? Wait a minute. What are you talking about? So was there or wasn't there? I mean, that seemed to me that you would want to ask a follow up there. Like, he was saying really incredible things. He said that Yes, there was no appearance of impropriety, not just an appearance of impropriety, but there was an abuse of the prosecutorial process by Damian Williams. How so would be the next question. What are you talking about? Other than having, an op-ed in a campaign website. And Emil Bovee also said there are many ongoing investigations into the origin of this case. And all of that, there was not really any follow-up or pushback. In fact, the judge made multiple attempts to say, he apologized for questions that he asked in case they may, well, I'm sorry if these may seem elementary to you in terms of how I'm asking. I'm just trying to understand. He also at many points said that I'm not taking issue with anything you're saying. I don't want you to misunderstand that I'm taking issue. I'm just trying to understand. It was just incredibly deferential in a situation where there was no deference that should have been afforded to the Department of Justice in this circumstance. These should have been tough questions, and they weren't asked. There was one other striking moment where Emil Bovee said, the fact that Mayor Adams is in this courtroom today is the problem. He should be governing. The fact that we have an elected official not doing his job is the problem. Okay, so we're never going to have public corruption cases again. So that means nobody who's an elected official can ever be in a courtroom and never be prosecuted. That's what he's saying. But again, there was no questioning to really tease that out. And because Mayor Adams' team was on the same side and consenting to this motion to dismiss, there was no other voice of reason in the room. And instead, you just got a lot of disappointment and frustration from what should have been a really robust process.
So what happens now?
So there's sort of small bore and big. On the small level, there still are ways in which there can be repercussions for Eric Adams, but that's not really where I have my eye on that. But the district attorney can bring charges. There really are very comparable charges that Alvin Bragg could bring, and we all know sitting at this table, Alvin Bragg has done that in the past, and it's picked up where the feds have fumbled. Kathy Hochul has an ability to take some action here. But that's as to Eric Adams so that he doesn't escape any accountability. What Christie is getting at, and the issue here, is so much bigger. It was shocking to read about and now hear about some of the things that Emil Bovee thought it was appropriate to say in a court of law. Just essentially say, you know what, a quid pro quo is fine. First of all, it's not normal at all. That is just not something that happens. And you can't talk about weaponizing. We talked about the idea that you are saying I can bring a criminal case against somebody and then say, you know what, I'm willing to temporarily withdraw that if you do my bidding. That is not this country. I mean, it is. I can no longer be sort of like I'm shocked, but it is amazing that somebody who came from an esteemed district, from the Southern District of New York, had the temerity to show up and say that in that courtroom. It's really a disgrace.
Mike, your reporting has borne out is how Bovee is the architect of the quid pro quo and even seeming to be a collaborator, based on your reporting, with Adams' own defense attorneys. How much of their work is he doing for them at this point?
I mean, he basically builds the off-ramp for the Justice Department to take the car off the highway. That is what he does. He goes to the lawyers and says, tell me how hard it is for him to do his job. And obviously that gets you to certain answers that got them to this determination, which he admits himself wasn't based on the law or the fact. You guys were both saying this, and it just can't be said enough. And there's so much going on that it's so hard for us to concentrate on one thing. This is so extraordinary. Like, I don't have the legal experience that these two folks do, but I've covered a fair amount of cases. This is not how a federal investigation ends, ever. There are, different types of things that happen around sentencing. There's different types of things that happen around cooperation.
Pardons.
That kind of, this is so outside the bounds of what the post-Watergate norms are, and even the entire history of the Justice Department. And I don't mean to keep on coming back to that, but in a time when there is just so much going on and it's hard to understand what's important, what really matters, what's different this time? What stands out and what are the long-term implications? This is opening up a whole new door, a whole new world to the justice system.